You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Matt McGachy, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians. We talk all about their lives and music while sharing killer craft beers. If you've ever wanted to sneak backstage and share a beer with one of your favorite musicians, well, Vox and Hops is the podcast for you. This week on the podcast, I dropped a killer episode with Kelly Schaefer of Atheist. There is this episode and over 440 other ones to help you enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. So what are you waiting for? It's time to become a Vox and Hops head. Cheers!
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. Thank you very much for being here. You know, I appreciate you taking the time to hang out and listen to this nerdery. I do appreciate it very, very much. This episode with my dude Scott Evans was very, very fun. We go into a lot of recording technique stuff, which is obviously very relevant to my interests at the moment, because that is all I'm doing with my spare time is making music and working on projects. So this was a really informative episode. He's a really smart dude, and he has worked on some amazing sounding records, and his band Kowloon Walled City is super, super cool. The new record sounds amazing, so definitely give that a spin. I just have one quick thing to plug. Well, two quick things to plug before we get into this episode. One is, a lot of people have been asking for a Shred Shed walkthrough, and I've never done it until now. You can go over to YouTube. I posted a walkthrough last week, so if you haven't seen it, there is a tour of the Shred Shed, and it's just called A Tour of the Shred Shed. So if you type that in to the YouTube search, I'm sure it will pop right up. That's over on the Tone Mob YouTube page. I'm going to be a lot more active with that this year, so if you could hit me with a subscribe, that would be very, very beneficial. I would really appreciate it. I'm going to be trying a bunch of different content. I'm not going to go crazy with the 30 videos in 30 days thing again, because that seemed to have some bad juju around it since everything caught on fire when I tried to do that. So not going to do that, but I will be much more active this year. I'm shooting for at least a video a week. I don't think that's too insane. So we're going to shoot for that, see what happens. Some of them will be vlogs. Some of them will be demos. People have actually responded to the vlogs a lot better than I anticipated. So I'll be doing my best to provide information and just value in any way that I can over there. So if you could slide over to YouTube, I would super appreciate that. And then the last thing is the same thing that I plugged last week, which is there is something special happening on February 9th. And patrons of this podcast, those in the text chat and the email list, are going to know before anybody else. The patrons are going to know first, because obviously they deserve some special treatment, followed by the text chat and email list. So those are free to join if you want to. You can go to tonemob.com, hit the Join the Mob tab to join the newsletter, or you can text the number that's in the show notes of this podcast, which is seriously one of my favorite things that I've done external to the podcast. It's so cool to get to talk to everybody and just jabber back and forth about gear, about music, about really just whatever. Sometimes it has absolutely nothing to do with anything, which is really, really cool. And there's no algorithm filtering it through or anything like that. So if you want to talk to me, boom, it comes right to me. And that's a great way to do that. So, okay, I won't bore you with anything else. Let's dive right into this episode with my dude Scott. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Tone Mob Podcast, the show about guitar stuff occasionally, sometimes. I'm your host, Blake Weiland, and with me today I have Scott Evans from Kowloon Walled City and a bunch of recording projects, like too many to name, but here he is. Let's get into it.
That's me. Hello. Yes, hi. How's it going?
Dude, I am so excited to do this. I've actually been meaning to get you on for a while, and then a bunch of people in the Facebook group attached to this show were like, hey, you should get him on because he just did your favorite band's record. I'm like, oh, yeah. And then that was the impetus to me messaging you, and here we are.
Oh,
you know?
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for thinking of me.
Dude.
That's great.
So maybe we dive into this. This could get really deep, but in the 30,000 foot view, we dive into your backstory for those who maybe aren't familiar. Like when did you start playing and when did you start recording and all that jazz?
It's so uninteresting. I am old. I'm 50 and I've been playing since I was a kid, since I was in high school. I played bass for a long time and sort of slowly transitioned to playing guitar. And I got a little more serious about guitar when Kowloon got going. But really for a long time, I pretty much played guitar like a bass.
Yeah.
And still sort of do. I mean, I'm kind of a guitar player, but I get by.
Me too. It's fine.
Recording wise, not long after when I was in high school, when I started playing, I got a 4-track, and so did a couple of friends. And we all spent every waking hour, the 4-track thing grabbed me more than playing music, I think. It was just this it was amazing. You could do a few things and then play it back and have a recording that, oh my God, I can do this. It was, overdubbing and mixing and all that. So one of my best friends from high school went off to recording school, a legit 4-year program for recording. And I went and got a computer science degree. And basically spent the next, couple decades as a software person doing a lot of recording, as a serious hobby or a very serious hobby or weird obsession. And playing in some bands, none really of note or anything. We moved to California about 15 years ago, and I guess it was more than that. It might have been 16 or 17 years ago. And at that point, a couple years after that, I started playing in Kowloon and started meeting more bands and more good bands than I had when I lived on the East Coast. Started doing more recording in practice spaces, where I had a rig where I would take to people's practice space, record them there, mix it at home. That's how we did the first 2 Kowloon records, Turk Street and Gambling on the Richter Scale. And I don't know, work just picked up. And that's, 15 years, 17 years later, or whatever, that's where I'm at now. I don't program much anymore. I'm a day a week now. I tried to quit and kind of couldn't. The people I worked with were like, please just stay a little bit. And I was like, okay, it is much more financially stable than engineering. But I've been trying to make a go at full-time engineering for a couple years now, despite COVID. And still the wraparound to talking about my buddy Greg, who I grew up with, he's been one of my muses forever. So he went off to do, legit and, work at a bunch of big studios in New York. And basically I spent a lot of time like being pulled along in his wake.
Okay.
And that was really helpful for me because everything else I've done, I've had to learn myself about recording. And having a friend who has been learning from the best people in the world is invaluable. I mean, having any friends who are doing it is great. It just gives you someone to talk to and sympathize with and send mixes to and all that. But having someone who's a pro and who's working with pros was really great. So sorry, that is, I said it wasn't interesting and then I talked for 5 minutes, but that's kind of the origin story.
It's a podcast. It gets really uninteresting when you stop talking. That's what I tell people. Right. You got to keep talking or it gets really weird.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah.
I can relate to that last part in a big way, especially right now. I'm dipping my toes in video production world, in a more serious way, more in a creative, weird artsy way than a YouTube way. But although I do plan on doing some more YouTube stuff. And my friend Devon, he's been doing this for a long time, and I'm constantly bothering him with the dumbest questions, what's this lens mount mean? I don't know what any of this stuff is, and I'm realizing that world is as deep as the recording and gear world is. I understand it so much better. So having somebody who knows
video stuff is so deep.
Editing and everything has it's just helps so
yeah,
much.
I'm a photographer, so I understand, still photography to some degree.
Okay.
I'm not, not a mega pro or whatever, but I do all right. But video is like this whole, even though I know photography and I know audio, video is still like, there is a lot to know.
Yeah.
It's a deep world, but it's really fun. I feel like that's it. Like I've avoided getting into that stuff because I know it would be like,
it's
like just getting sucked down, a well of excitement and exploring and learning. And I got no time in my life for
honestly, it feels to me, this might sound kind of weird to the listeners, but it feels to me like the first time I plugged into a good tube amp and I like strummed a chord.
Yeah,
and I was
exactly. No, I exactly know what you mean.
I've been doing this wrong. Oh, then there's this pedal and then I can run stereo. And then like you get into the whole, and now I have this whole room full of nonsense that I live in.
Yeah, it's a trap. You're doomed.
So, and now the same thing's happening with video. I'm like, oh, this is going to be expensive and a never-ending process of learning. But that's what's exciting about any creative stuff, right? It never ends. There's always something to learn, whether you've been doing it for 50 years or 3 years. There's always something to learn with this stuff.
It truly never ends. Yeah. But yes, I mean, I definitely feel like I've been doing this for 100 years and I am still learning regularly. I still feel like I'm getting better and refining the tools that I have in my brain to accomplish, with my hands or my tools or whatever, what I want, what I'm hearing. Yeah. Like it's still working on that.
So I super wanted to get you on specifically to talk about recording in a partially selfish way because I have recorded a fair amount, but I'm still very much a novice. And I do get people, especially in the text chat that's associated with this podcast, asking me about making content around how I record and how I do things. And I'm like, man, I barely know what I'm doing. I'm
same. Yeah.
I'm like, I just stick a mic in front of it and go, yep, that worked. Or nope, that didn't work. Change it around, go in the DAW and like, I don't know, move this around over here, see what happens. Oh, that worked. Like, I really don't know what I'm doing, but I wondered if maybe talking to you, like what was something that you learned really early, whether it was a mic placement thing or a signal chain thing or anything that was just kind of this aha moment that became a go-to for you?
I think I'm going to flip that around.
Okay.
One of the things that I learned later that I wish I had known earlier. So when I was younger, we would set up drums, say, and put mics on them and then spend, and I'm sure people listening to this can relate, hours, moving the snare mic an inch each way.
Yeah.
And maybe to some degree you have to do this to get to the point where you don't have to do it anymore. But these days when I do setups, I'll put up, I don't know, a dozen mics on drums and a bunch on guitars and whatever, and I will move or change 2 things after that. It's just, I think it took a while for me to realize that, I mean, getting things right and knowing what changes will happen when you change them is important.
Yeah.
But the 2 things. One, the time to learn about that is not during a recording session.
Right. When you're being paid. Yeah.
Well, or when someone's waiting to be creative. The time to do that is when you have experiment time at home. Like, yeah, put a 57 on a snare and move it 10 degrees and hit it over and over again and then go listen and see the differences and just like file that away. So the thing that I realized, I think, was eventually that to some degree, man, I wonder if I can synthesize this well. You gotta learn what is changeable and what isn't.
Okay.
And where the problems are coming from. If you're trying to get a snare drum to sound great by just moving around a 57 that's 1 inch from the snare drum head, in the end, people talk about, oh, what's your favorite snare drum mic? I barely care at this point.
Right.
Like literally. because so much of the drum sound comes from everything else. You know, it comes from the room mics, and it comes from the overheads, and it comes from the way the snare is tuned, or the drum itself, or the way the drummer hits, and if they're consistent, or the drum head choice, or all these things. And, you know, I've sort of developed to a point where I'm using all these other mics to do a lot of the snare sound, and the snare mic is, sorry to focus on snare drums, but is just like giving me this pop, this transient, and any mic can do that. So it's sort of like backing up a little bit and listening to things all together and working from there. Like, what does this all sound like? So I don't know if that was actually helpful at all regarding the question that you asked, but it is something that's really important. And I think it's especially important today. More and more people, it seems like, record things one thing at a time.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. You know, I've worked with a bunch of bands that have never recorded playing together. It's all, you know, like, okay, we're going to track the drums, then we're going to get them all edited, and then we'll do the, you know, maybe we'll do a scratch guitar while we're tracking the drums, or maybe not. We'll just, the drummer will just play to a click, and then we'll do a bass take, and then we'll get the bass perfect, and then we'll go into guitars, and maybe we'll take DIs in case we want to reamp. And that's not what you do at band practice.
Yeah.
You know, that's not what you do at a show. Like, that to me is taking all the making music out of making music. And so listening to things as a whole and seeing how they glue together and what needs to be fixed in that context is way, way better, I think, than listening to things, you know, with a microscope. I mean, occasionally you got to zoom in, for sure. But I just definitely, you know, if you got only 8 mics and you're like, well, I want to use all 8 on the drums, I really would encourage people to try instead using 2 of those for guitar and bass instead, and recording everyone at once and thinking that way. Just feel like it changes everything. It's, you know, and it's the way I've always come up recording and still try to record everyone when I can.
Yeah.
And that includes, you know, technical bands, Yautja, super tech, right? Like crazy tech, live from the floor. Town Portal, you know, also intricate, weird music, live from the floor. Like, good bands can do it.
I think that there's something I've done it both ways, and I feel like there's something. I mean, it's not like I don't enjoy records that are recorded that way, you know, all chopped up and done individually. Of course I do. I'm sure way more than I even realize, but I do think there is something to be said about like hearing a band just be a band and doing what they do, you know, versus everything being so clinical and 100% accurate with triggered drums and everything. I like I said, I love music that's made that way too. I'm not saying it's good or bad to go whichever way you're comfortable with, but I do think there's some spice when the band's all playing together, you know, that gets lost.
Yeah, I mean, within reason, I'll take something that sounds a little bad, but doesn't need, you know, 2 days of editing or replacing or something over the option to replace it or reamp it or whatever. And I don't, you know, that may make my records sound a little less perfect than they should, but fine. I don't know. You know, like 5 years from now, when you press play on that record, you'll know what it is right away, at least. And, you know, I'm okay with that.
So I have a specific question for you when it comes to recording guitars, which I'm sure will be of interest to a large portion of this audience. I've always found it's really easy for me to get clean or clean-ish guitar sounds. Kind of, I can almost throw the mic just about anywhere, and it's going to sound pretty good within reason. With dirt, I find it like really heavy guitars, which you've done a lot of. I find it takes me a lot more work to get that to sound the way it sounds to my ears in the room in a recorded mix. And I haven't found a lot of consistency with like little tricks or anything. I'm constantly just having to like, I don't know, I'll play with it until I get it to sound right. And that's basically the only trick.
Well, what's an example of something you're trying to do that you would normally, like, how would you start? Like, you're going to do some like chuggy, you know, heavy guitar. Like, how would you start recording that?
Well, so the way I've done it lately is I've done a lot of it in the box, which isn't my preferred way to do it. But if I'm going to do like really heavy chuggy stuff, I'll usually start the way I do everything, which is get the sound I like out of the guitar. Like, okay, I got the pedals and amp and everything dialed in. I like how this sounds right in front of me. And then my go-to situation in order to get it sounding the way coming out of the monitors, the way I'm experiencing it myself, would be I got to use at least 2 mics. What those are tend to not vary very much. I really like the Aston Stealths on just about everything because they're pretty flexible. So I'll use 2 of those. One on I usually play a 2-12, so 1 on each speaker. And I kind of have to play with the placement a little bit. I'll make sure they're different. Like if one's right on the cone, I'll have one more, to the outside of the speaker. Sometimes play with the angles depending on what sound I got. And then I'll almost always turn actually this mic right here on and point it up and use it as a room mic because because this room sounds pretty good. I don't always use that room mic. Like so then I'll record the part, go back and listen to it, and I almost always have to hard pan the 2 close mics and then blend the room into taste. And then most of the time I will move one of the close mics just like ever so slightly off, and then it fills it out.
Interesting.
But that's just something I stumbled upon. I don't even know if that's a good way to do it or not. It's just what I do.
Well, so I guess let me try and I can, like, without being there, here's my thoughts on that. This is me personally, and everyone should record things the way they want to. I almost never, I'm trying to decide if I want to say never, basically never, hard pan mics that are on the same guitar source. What I find, I always call that, it sounds like weird mono. Because it's the same performance, basically the same waveforms, just like a little different, and it's just going to mess with your ears and still sort of collapse to mono. If you want width out of guitar, I think the ways to get it are either a close mic and a far mic, which you can pan, or, a set of close mics summed to one place in the stereo field, and then a distant mic panned, or doubling your guitars. Those are, I think, the choices. Like there are people who run, I've recorded lots of people recording multiple amps, and same thing, like, hard panning those amps, if you got a 2 amp rig that is mono, it's not stereo, and you hard pan those, it's still just going to be weird mono. It's not, it works live, but in recordings, I don't find that that's effective. I also try generally to keep mics equidistant, at least. Everyone knows this stuff, I think, by now, from the speaker, if you're doing multiple miking, just for phase stuff. And sometimes I'll do like, 1 at 45 or that kind of thing. I'm more likely to pick 2 very different mics, like a very bright mic and a very dark mic, or, the ribbon, the dynamic, all this normal stuff that people do. And for heavy stuff, I basically almost never use a room mic. And I think what this comes back to is it's a noble goal to try and get guitars or drums sounding, like you said, like they sound in the room to you. But it's also like somewhat impossible. And if you did it, it probably is not going to be super satisfying coming out of speakers, because it's just not what we are conditioned to want guitars or drums to sound like. When you stand in a room with a drum kit, what you hear is, like 20 feet from a drum kit, you hear a lot of cymbals. You hear, the kick drum doesn't sound very punchy. It sounds kind of like ill-defined and not very loud. And it's just, that is in fact not what most of us want a recorded drum kit to sound like for like loud rock music. Which is why we put all these mics everywhere, is to try and get, more control over it. And similarly for guitar, it's just really, really hard to, I think, to map the experience of being in front of a 412 and a 100-watt amp to, coming out of like a 6-inch speaker.
Yeah.
It's even harder because most of what we do is we mic up guitar amps very close, which is not the way anyone listens to them. But with a multi, if you got a 212 or a 412 and you pull a mic back, you start getting weird phase stuff. And so, long story short, for me, what I generally am trying to do is I've spent my whole life listening to music very closely and sort of like calibrating my radar as to what I think things sound. It's basically sort of like, what illusion are you trying to create? Like, okay, I want this to sound like it feels when I'm in the room with the guitars or with the drums. Like I just want to put it on and be like, that. Now that is a great guitar tone. So that, to me, for instance, for heavy stuff, that means really not a lot of room stuff. Like, old thrash records, that kind of thing, had a lot of reverb on the guitars. And honestly, in hindsight, I don't like that at all.
Right.
Like, I prefer when that stuff dried up. And I want like a Meshuggah or a Megadeth Rust in Peace or I'm trying to think of other good examples of, like these. Remember when the first few Lamb of God records came out?
Yeah.
They were like very dry. And I love that. For more clean stuff or, whatever, I'll generally do more of a room mic thing. Anyway, the truth is, for almost all guitars, my approach is very similar, heavy or not, which is, 1 or 2 mics, maybe 3 mics, and put them all on a mixing console so I can sit there with the faders and try blends.
Okay.
And you can do this in the box too. But, sometimes it's the kind of thing where it's like, oh, this 201 or this 57 sounds great, but I just want a little bit of low end from it. And that's why I like consoles instead of a bunch of preamps, is because you see, like, people cannot see this, but you can. I'm like moving my hands like they're on faders.
Yeah.
Like, because it's just so quick to be like, let me try it with this one way up. Let me try it with this one way up. Here's 3 mics. Let me try a whole bunch of different blends of these 3 and see which one works the best. And, usually I'll end up with one main mic and a little push from the other one. Every once in a while, it'll be 50-50 2 mics, almost never 3 mics. And yeah, usually it's a ribbon and a dynamic or something like that. Sometimes when we did that Town Portal record, almost all the guitar tone was a weird high-end DPA. Who was it before DPA? 4011. It's a really nice small diaphragm condenser, like, a $3,000 small diaphragm. It should not have worked on guitar. Sounded incredible. Like, made every other mic sound broken.
Wow.
So that was almost all we used. We found something else to blend in for a little bit of something. But the point is, like, just always start pretty simple, an inch or 2 back, with the mic pointed pretty much at the place where the dust cap meets the cone, and go listen. And then you know what your moves are to make from there. It's like, oh, this is too bright, move it out. This is too dark, probably change settings on the amp, or change mics, don't use a ribbon. And that's it. Like, it's, the ingredients are very simple. And I don't want to say I'm arbitrary about the mics that I pick, but I feel like I can sort of make anything work. And it's always good to just start with stuff and keep it simple, and then start trying to make changes to get it where you want. And if you do that enough, I think it starts to become pretty obvious, like, okay, this is working or this isn't. And a lot of it is just having a tone that translates well, out of the amp.
Right.
So if someone's got a great bedroom tone, super scoopy and like tons of low end and real woofy, over time you get to realize, like, you just hear it come out of the amp and you go, that ain't gonna work.
Right.
Like
I get that sounds cool, but it's not going to sound the same coming out of the speakers at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
the other thing I think that is important, to come back to what I said before, is record with that guitar tone. Whatever it is, don't play a DI and change it later. Like, we play differently. If I replaced your Les Paul with a Strat, you would play it differently. And, and I think whenever possible, yeah, just
do.
Get a sound, put that sound back into your headphones and play.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, it's interesting. So and then with guitars, do you usually, when you're mixing, do you usually leave them centered? Like you said you didn't really pan them much.
well, most of the like loud rock stuff I do, there's two guitars.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and if it's a 3-piece band, with one guitar player, we will usually double the guitars.
Okay.
I don't usually do like quads. A lot of people like to double the doubled guitars. And to me, that sort of smooth things out a lot. And I'm just not into that. I want to hear all like the grit and texture and the interesting stuff. So I think this is one of these things where people think that by adding more, it will make it bigger. And for me, it's the opposite. It's more like by taking away, it gets bigger.
Yeah.
So when you can remove gain, when you can remove overdubbed guitars, like the less that's in there, like the fewer ingredients, the more you will taste the ingredients in the recipe.
Right.
And that's what I really want. If I'm doing a band, and I've done a few of these where the guitar player, it's a 3-piece, say, and the guitar player's like, I do not want to double my parts. Usually what I'll do is I'll put another mic 10 feet away, 12 feet away, something like that, like an Omni, something that will pick up the room and some character, and I'll pan those, maybe like 60% left and right. And then maybe sometimes at mix time, play a little bit with adding a little bit of delay to the room mic. You can kind of hear it when you do that. Like you just add a few milliseconds, and eventually, if you're sitting there listening, you'll like hear them go from being one sound to two sounds.
Right.
And it's that point where it doesn't sound like a slap delay. It doesn't sound like a flam, but it does separate the sounds. That's where it's like, okay, now we've got some width and separation out of one guitar.
Yeah. I feel like that's probably, when I'm doing the double mic thing, that probably has more of an impact because I'm not necessarily putting a delay on it, but I am kind of effectively doing that with the two tracks. Because I'll zoom way in and I'll move it like a millisecond, which isn't putting a delay on it per se, but when it's the same.
No, and a millisecond probably is not enough.
Yeah.
Usually I think to get them to really separate, a millisecond is enough for it to get sort of phasey and weird, I think.
Yeah, I might be off with my time there. I remember exactly what it is.
Yeah, but it's usually more like 15 or 18 or 20 mil. It's a bunch, like to get them to not be phasing with each other anymore and to really kind of like detach.
Yeah. I know that sound you're talking about, though, for sure. Like, I've heard that moment. Like, oh, there it is. And I think that's probably more of what I'm hearing when I'm doing what I'm doing versus the actual, like, hard pan thing. It's probably more from that separation than the panning.
Right. Yeah.
So that makes sense.
And like I said, I wasn't trying, I hope it doesn't sound like I'm trying to pick apart your approach, because I really strongly believe that recording should be individual and not groupthink. And there are best practices that we learn through mistakes. And I have a enormous list of those. But what I was really more doing was just sort of responding like, oh, here's my version of that.
That's what I was asking you to do. So that's fine.
Okay. Yeah. Just want to be clear that I am not trying to, be critical.
Because admittedly, I haven't done as much like research on it as I should for the amount that I do record. I really just am like run and gun. I don't know, shove it in there and see what happens, and like really just trying things. But that's always.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, all I would say is that try and find time when you're not trying to get something done, and just have experiment days.
Oh, well, I need to stop doing that, actually. I've had lots of experiment days and not enough get stuff done days.
Oh, sorry.
So most of my life has been an experiment. It was really only until I played with a band for several years. And then everybody started having kids and everything, and that kind of fell by the wayside a little bit. But it wasn't until 2021 when I really started recording my solo stuff seriously. And that's why it's been such an interesting dive for me to try to get better at this, because I'm...
Oh, it's a trap, dude. Yeah,
it's one thing I have learned, though, and I think that the audience can take take away from this. I'm really bad about buying and using boring gear. Like, it took me forever when I first started getting into pedals. I went like a year without buying a tuner because I was like, I can buy another fuzz. Why would I want to buy a tuner pedal? I can just use this stupid little.
Wow, of all the examples, I mean,
like I can just. I'm bad at buying boring gear. Like this boom arm here that I have, it's been so nice. I just use the stupid like amp, one you would use to mic an amp with. I just had that sat on my desk for years because I didn't want to buy. I just have a hard time buying boring, quote unquote, boring stuff. But when I do, it changes the whole workflow and makes your life so much easier. So don't be like me.
I love all that. Like, I mean, I get it. Like, buying, I've got to buy 20 mic cables and it's $400 and that sucks.
Yeah.
Like, nothing has changed here. But it is always gratifying to be like, I know all my mic cables work.
Right.
Like, or I know my mic stands aren't going to collapse. Like, I finally, I don't know, 5 or 8 years ago, decided on a kind of mic stand that I liked, bought a handful of them, like 6 or 8 of them, which did not amount to that much money in the end, and took all my, like, on stage and whatever other brand of, Guitar Center type, and I just put them all out in the practice space next door for free.
Yep.
And it was like the best day of my life. The boringest purchase. But I mean, literally, like from then on, I have been able to trust every single mic stand I grab, and it's just great.
What kind of mic stand do you like?
Oh, now we're talking.
Yeah.
The most of what I use, my personal opinion is that every recording studio greatly overinvests in tall mic stands, the tall tripod ones, like, which are always, or they buy the shorty ones, and basically, like, neither of those are good for drums. Like, for drums, you want medium mic stands. And even for guitars, you never want tall mic stands, right? So, like, the only thing you need a tall mic stand for is, like, a vocalist. And those things are garbage for overheads because they're not sturdy enough. So, most of what I have, I'm looking over in the other room right now to see them, are Atlas round basses and a shorter medium, I think Atlas, what's that? I don't know, the post that comes up from it.
Yeah.
And then a DNR boom.
Nice.
And I can mic floor toms with those. I can mic rack toms with those. They're great for guitars. I have a couple very short ones for kick drums. That is most of what I have. And then the thing I'm talking to you in is like one of these big Atlas, like cast iron triangle bass mics stands with an Atlas boom on it. And these are really good for vocals or for like short overheads. Yeah. They're not super expensive. And they're very well built, and they're somewhat modular so that you can replace parts on them. And then for very tall ones, for doing like overheads or room mics or whatever, there is Sharkbite by accident bought a couple of these Ultimate. I can't remember which model it is. Like tall with like a weird triangle base and like sort of rollerblade looking wheels on it.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about.
They're great. They're extremely good. They're just really flexible and built well, and they hold up well. And like, I would not expect that something called Ultimate would be Ultimate, but in fact, it's really quite good.
Nice.
That's the end of my microphone stand tech talk.
I like that. I'm starting to like, my brain is going into like, what are the best boring gear purchases that I've made recently? I mentioned
oh my God.
I mentioned the Gator boom arm. I love that. You know what? Like, this sounds really extra silly, but for so long I was editing on this 13-inch MacBook Air, one of the newer ones, but I'm so dumb. Let me back up a little bit. My main computer that I ran for years and years and years to do this podcast and all my recording on was one of those cheese grater Mac Pro towers from 2009.
Yeah, that's what I'm recording myself on right now, talking to you.
Great machine. Love that thing. But I started getting to a point where some of the software I wanted to use just wasn't compatible anymore. And so I I was like, well, let's get an Air. Everyone's raving about these M1s. Let's get one of those things.
Yeah.
And so I still have the MacBook Pro, and I will be integrating it into everything, or the Mac Pro, excuse me. It's still, honestly, this is a little bit of a tangent, but that thing still works phenomenally well. I upgraded it to an SSD and put some extra terabytes.
They are awesome computers.
They work great. And
they're great.
11 years old now, or almost 12. Like, it's insane. Anyway, but I was just like, I had that hooked up to a 720p like Vizio TV for my monitor, but it was big. It was like 32 inches. And so when I switched to this MacBook Air, it took me forever. And finally I realized I was squinting at everything. I'm like, this can't be good long term. If you're going to be like doing this stuff at a professional level, maybe like don't be dumb and be a professional. So this monitor I have now, this BenQ monitor, it's been like life-changing for me.
Oh, I have a BenQ monitor.
It's so good. It's
so good.
It's so good. It's so boring. So boring, but it's life-changing when you're staring at it all day, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I am definitely really weird and finicky about this stuff. But what I like to do, if I can, is get stuff to a point where it's like simple and done, and I don't have to think about it, and it doesn't mess with my head, and I can focus on doing the stuff that I'm supposed to be doing. So, you know, if you're spending a lot of time like, oh, I'm on this tiny screen and I can never get two plugins on the same, you know, or like things like that are like, I just don't want, like within reason, I don't ever want to be doing this, you know, like I don't ever want to be crawling around behind my rack trying to, you know, change the way something is patched up. So I have patch bays, you know, and patch bays are a really boring purchase, but they're a game changer once you get used to them.
That's one of my big things this year will be running cables up and like you can see, the audience can't see this, but you see like everything's done with the surface mount out here. So if the redneck part of me wants to just like zip tie the cables to it and run it over and like so I can have boxes, but I'm gonna do it right. I'm trying to be better about like doing things the right way. And I'm gonna have my electrician buddy come over. We're gonna run some new conduit to everywhere that I've like learned that I like to have mics and have a patch bay set up like you're talking about. So because I'm constantly tripping over cables like all the time. And it's just like, this is so dumb.
The other cheap way you can do that if you want is you could just buy a short snake, you know, like a stage box.
Yes.
You know, so then you've got, you know, you don't have to have a million cables. You have one cable with 8 XLR inputs or whatever that you can take anywhere in the room.
And I think I've thought about doing that as a stopgap, but I think like I mean, what you're talking about sounds way better. I think,
like you know,
I think I've considered doing just that, but I know myself well enough. Just like it took me a year to buy a tuner pedal, that if I do that, I'll never do the one I really want. And so
yeah, sure. There is always that push and pull.
So I'm trying to just do the thing that you want to do in the first place. You know, I mean, this shred shed was kind of a good example. Like I could have done it a lot smaller and like a lot cheaper, but I knew it was like, is that what you really want to do? Shouldn't you just, you know, bite the bullet and do the thing that you really want to do instead of like adding on later? And with what happened to lumber costs here recently, I'm really glad I did it all.
Yeah, really.
I'm really, really glad I did it all at the same time. So it was a lot to bite off.
Yeah, I mean, I think the trick is to find the it's always good, I think, to try and find the right cutoff point where you're not obsessing over your workspace or your system, you know, so much that it's keeping you from actually doing work. And I do know people like that, like, oh, they're just tuning their to-do list system a little more, you know, and it's like, that's not really what it's about. It's all in service of actually doing stuff.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I always try and think about what it is you're actually trying to get done and how you can serve that with, you know, with tweaks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Instead of making the absolute perfect, you know, whatever.
Because the odds are it probably won't be. Even if you do like spend hours obsessing over it, you'll get done with it and be like, but I can do this other thing too.
Well, 6 months later, you probably will want some change. And so you do need to keep some degree of sort of like flexibility and looseness into whatever you do. You know, like you just know, you know, when I see people do like really involved installations or, that kind of thing where it's like, this is very permanently here. It's just like, man, in 5 years, you just know that's going to look abandoned.
Yep.
Because whatever, you made an exact, you built an exact thing to hold this TV, but 5 years from now, like those TVs won't exist anymore or whatever, like there's a million examples of this. So finding things that are, I don't know, aesthetically okay and work well, but are not painting you into a corner.
Right.
In sort of all ways in life, I think is a good way to walk through life.
I agree. And there's something to be said for the ready, fire, aim approach too. Like just get in there and do it. Like I said, I don't really know what I'm doing most of the time, so I just have to just do it and see what happens. And if it sucks, then we'll do it differently the next time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very in my life. I'm very ready, aim, fire, and that's great in some ways, and really a limitation in some ways. And I think is the reason that it's a number of things like that I'm doing right now, other people would be doing in their life when they're 28.
Right.
It's just like because other people are more aggressive about deciding to move in a direction.
Yeah.
So I think there is a fine line between the two. And, in the end, what you want to do is get stuff done and not make stupid decisions that you can't undo.
Yeah, this is a slight tangent to that. But one of the things, I'm business partners with Scott over at Stringjoy. And one of the things we've talked about with other business folks and just other people in general is one of the great things about having a partner like that we really trust each other and work well together is that decisions get made. And, because I talk to him almost every single day, and there's always something that we have to decide, and it could be a big thing or a little thing. But if either of us were left to our own devices, we might agonize over it for weeks, whereas we can hop on the phone and hash it out between the two of us and decide in a half hour what the course of action is,
And then that's it. That's it. That's the course. And, now make that work. And I feel like recording, to bring it back to something about music, is best served with that kind of mentality. When I interviewed Matt Bayless years ago for Tape Op, I remember he said, recording is about making decisions. And I just thought that was awesome. It's really stuck with me. So now, anytime when we do another take, let's do another take just to have it. It's like, what does that mean?
Right.
Like, what does that mean just to have it? Like, what are we going to do with it? Like you just played it great. What are we doing here? Like all we're doing is recording you guys playing a song and you just did it and it was good. Like we don't need you're hoping that lightning is going to hit you during this take, and there's lots of examples of that. I think let's take a DI in case we want to redo the guitar tones later. Like, well, let's not, let's make that decision. And then we will make all these other little decisions based on that one being fixed. And that's how you get something at the end that glues together. Recording is about making decisions. And when you do make decisions, you can then proceed down the path that you have, put a few bricks in front of you to start walking.
Yeah.
And that's really important to get anything done. There's just no perfect anything.
That's so good. That's such an important thing. And, it's not just important for everybody listening to hear. It's important for me to hear too. Like it's important to remind myself because, especially us gear nerds, we can get so wrapped up into a paralysis by analysis situation where you just, like you said, we were talking about organization, but even just like, oh, I'll do that once I get this microphone, or I'll do that once I get this pedal. Sometimes you do need to wait for those things. Most of the time you don't. Most of the time you can probably just do it another way.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Once in a while there's a utility function that's like, okay, I really can't do that without that. But it's rare. You can usually find a way around. That's good. Making decisions. Recording is making decisions. It 100% is. 100%. I never thought of it that way.
Absolutely.
Wow. That's fantastic.
Recording it's about commitment. It's about committing. Like that might have been what he said. Recording is about committing. Yeah. But it is, if you commit, and the more you commit, the more you realize like what you want to commit and what you don't. Like you will make mistakes, but they will make you stronger.
That's right. Well, you know what? Now to unpack this thought a little bit further, that was more prevalent back in the day when everyone was recording to tape. You weren't doing a bunch of stuff in post. You could only do so much.
Oh, yeah.
You know? Like, you were just like, okay, that's what we're going to do because that's what we have. That's what we're doing. Now,
oh yeah, increasingly so as you go further back in time. You get to the 60s or the 50s, and it's really that way. But my favorite, somewhat modern example of that is, that what's it called? Unstoppable Recording Machine. Those guys. Yeah, they did a thing a while ago where they got their hands on the multi-track to Destroy, Erase, Improve by Meshuggah.
Okay.
Which was recorded to tape by a dude, I guess, who was like 19 at the time. And he basically they had the multi-tracks in Pro Tools or whatever. And he put all the faders at 0 and did the panning and pressed play. And it sounded like Destroy, Erase, Improve. It was just like,
nice.
Oh my God. What? This dude just tracked it this way. One of the best sounding and best metal records ever made. And, it was like done. It was crazy.
That's intense.
It's intense. It's really humbling. I don't remotely work that way. I do more work at mixed time than I'd like to, but I at least aspire to it. I think, it's good to know that that's where recording came from and know, that remember that you're making music. I mean, and if you're trying to make, beats or you're trying to make really complicated electronic music or that's a different world and that's all fine and great. I'm just talking about, dumb rock bands like the one I'm in.
Your band's good. Don't try to say that. Especially this latest record. Dude, this is great. This new one that you guys did. Whew, that was good, man.
Thank you.
I was blasting it here yesterday because I was like, I haven't actually got to that one yet. Dumb. I might be one of your best. I love that record. I'm going to be playing that the rest of the week. What was the process on that one like?
So thank you, by the way, and I think I can actually say. I can't always say this, but I think I can say that we're all happy with it, which is an accomplishment unto itself.
Yeah, no kidding.
The process was almost the same as our last couple of records, and definitely all of our, splits and all that. I do a lot of recording at the studio Sharkbite, which is just down the hall from the room I'm in now. They have a really great sounding live room. And an old Trident console that sounds good when it's working. And, the process roughly is we set everyone up. There are 3 ISO booths connected to the live room. So, bass and guitar amps in those. Everyone has headphones. And we play the songs a few times each.
Nice.
And when we get a good take, we listen back and see if there's any mistakes, and we fix those. And then we do another one. And that's about it. Then after that, this has also become normal. We'll have a day or two, overdub days. You probably, there are some leady things that John plays. So we need to do those because we don't typically take those live.
Right.
And then we'll do some layering. It's really subtle. We'll do a sort of sparkly clean version of some arpeggios and things like that, just to sit under the main guitar and have it maybe help it be a little more articulate, just to bring out a little sparkle or whatever. But hopefully it you don't notice it. So we some of that, and then we did the atypical thing of letting the records sit there on a hard drive for 3 or 4 years or whatever it was.
Oh, really?
While our singer, who is me, suffered from crippling writer's block and just couldn't get vocals done. So without getting into it too much, unlike all our previous records, we basically entered the studio, we entered the recording process with no lyrics or vocals written. That's never happened before. But I think we were all like, well, this guy needs a push. Let's just do this. And my brain was kind of broken, and it took a while. But eventually the process amounted to me doing vocals here in this room I'm standing in by myself over and over again. So sort of, writing or refining by hearing myself back.
Yeah.
Which usually you would do in a practice space. But I just didn't have that. So I was, recording them over and over again. And then, a few days of mixing, and that's that.
Nice. That is, I don't know if I've ever heard of that one before. I've definitely heard of people coming in the studio with no vocals and doing it there. But that big break, that is an interesting thing. Do you think that was ultimately beneficial doing it that way?
No.
Okay.
No.
Wouldn't choose to do that again. All right.
Hell no. It was terrible. I mean, the good part is I don't think that it was detrimental. I think the record's still like we know ourselves well enough and we know our songwriting well enough that we are able to pretty much be like, this is where the vocals go.
Right.
Like that was always in my head. I just didn't know what the vocals were. So we're able to write that way. And the record to me still feels 100% like it was written that way. And that's really important. There may be, maybe sometimes we'd be more likely to, let's drop a beat from here, or let's make this shorter or longer or whatever, if we're doing the vocals in the more traditional way. But regardless of it coming out okay, the process still sucked.
Yeah.
I felt terrible the whole time. Like, it was just sitting on me. And no, I wouldn't recommend it.
Okay, good. Not recommended. All right. Well, we are getting close to the end of the podcast. And traditionally, I close out with a couple classic questions. But before I do that, I like to give the guests the opportunity to, plug anything they want to plug, shout out anybody they want to shout out, say whatever you want to say to a few thousand people. Like now's the time.
Oh, man, I don't have anything to say. Let's see. Dude, I don't have anything to sell. I got nothing to say. I'm trying to think of something interesting. Like all I've been doing is like trying to stay COVID free and mixing and stuff. I have not really been operating in the world much. I'm trying to think of like a record I discovered here. Let me look over here and see if there's something I can say. I'm not doing well here.
I can say for you that everyone does need to check out the latest record, and it is available pretty much everywhere you can stream things, I'm assuming.
That's true. It is definitely not available on vinyl yet, which is not great.
I understand that struggle. Woo!
But yeah, who doesn't? Hopefully this month, we'll see. We had a test pressing issue that we had to address, and we did address it. And hey, okay, I don't know. I got nothing. Go listen to the gospel record from 2004 or whatever. That's my advice to everyone here. What's it called? The Moon is a Dead World or something like that.
I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with it.
Well, so everyone I know is like, oh, you didn't know this band? They're amazing. And no, I missed them until this year. Yeah, The Moon is a Dead World, 2005. Just weird metal. Totally great. Love it.
That sounds like right up my alley. I will definitely check that out. There we go.
That's all I got.
That's perfect.
Listen to that and listen to the new Low record, which I think everyone is already doing, but listen to the new Low record.
Yeah, that's good too. Okay, those are good plugs. I'll take those plugs. All right, classic questions before we go here. First one, what is your favorite Boss pedal?
Ooh. It's probably a TU2.
Oh, there you go.
Honestly.
That's a pretty common answer, actually. The TU2.
Yeah. Great pedal. And shout out to Boss for really like incredible enclosures, incredible durability, like.
Here we go. Blues Driver. Yep. I have one sitting right here for no reason.
Yep. I used a Blues Driver a lot. I modded Blues Driver a lot back in the day. Also a good pedal. I have all the classics.
Mm-hmm.
And I just can't get with any of them. It's so funny. Like, I'll try and chase one of the ones that I remember was like, Alex Newport, when he was in Fudge Tunnel, his guitar tone was like a super overdrive into a JCM 800 or something like that.
Right.
And I was like, that is the meanest guitar tone I've ever heard. I want it. So, I got that pedal and tried into a Marshall. I was like, I hate this. Like all of those pedals, they warp your tone so much. I think what I've realized is that me personally, I just like things that people would consider transparent.
Okay.
And really no Boss pedal is.
No, not really.
They all do their own thing. Also, speaking of boring utilities, what's the one that's, is it the line splitter?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the line splitter's cool. That is boring
I've been using
and
that
useful.
a lot while building pedals. I've been doing a lot of pedal building, and that one's just been great on the bench to, send one guitar signal into two different pedals, but only that pedal. And I just want to hear that, it's like a very simple, like splitter kind of thing. And on the bench, that's been super handy and useful.
Perfect. Shout out Boss for the utility. Thank you, Boss.
The most boring two pedals ever made. Here's a weird one that I'll throw out for Boss too, which is the TU3S.
Then that's the newer one, right?
No, whatever it's called, it's the one that has no pedal.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. Where it's just
like the top half of a TU3.
Yeah.
I'm sliding. That's what's on my pedal board. So I can go into that and always have it on. And I love that because like if I feel that during a show I'm slipping, my tuning is slipping, I can just like hold a single note, glance at it, like retune mid-set or mid-song, and fewer tuning breaks between songs, which is great.
Gotcha. Do you find that you miss the mute function that
I have a mute switch after.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. So no, you don't.
Yeah.
Easy enough. All right, cool. Last question. This is the one that gets a little bit dicey, gets a little hairy. What is your favorite kind of pizza?
When you say kind, what do you mean?
Well, if there's a specific pizzeria, that's cool. Or if there's a regional style that you like, or if there's a, particular combination of toppings, or any and all varieties, are up for discussion.
I grew up in New York, and so I grew up thinking that it was my birthright to be an asshole about pizza. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that basically most pizzas are wonderful, and I'm a happier person for it. I definitely still romanticize Two Boots Pizza in Greenwich Village in New York. It was always one of the most amazing slices of pizza I could get. There were a bunch of places near where I grew up in Long Island that always had amazing pizza. And when I visit my mom, we still get pizza from them. Mm-hmm. I am a mushroom and onion person.
Yeah, I can get on board with that.
I don't eat meat, so I don't do any meat pizzas. But I'll also do, and I think this is part of growing up in New York, I am perfectly happy with a cheese pizza. That was a regular dietary staple. Like here in the Bay Area, a burrito is a dietary staple.
Right.
But in New York and on Long Island, there are pizza places everywhere where you walk in and say, give me 2 slices. And they hand you 2 cheese, they heat up 2 cheese slices and you walk out with them.
Totally.
And that's just dietary staple. So I'm perfectly happy, and I don't feel like it's basic at all to do cheese pizza.
I didn't really understand, and I've said this so many times, the listeners get tired of it probably, but I didn't really understand the whole New York pizza thing, being, a West Coast guy. Until I went there. I'd look at pictures of it and be like, it looks like pizza. I don't understand, what...
Looks pretty boring.
It looks like pizza. But after I went there and sampled a bunch of pizza places, I was like, nope, I get it. I was fully prepared to call shenanigans on all of it. I was going in a hater, and then I came out a lover. Like, I was like, I do love this pizza. I think about it all the time. And fortunately, this is a very controversial opinion, Portland is really stepping their pizza game up. And
I feel like West Coast pizza has greatly improved since I've lived here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've actually had some friends from the East Coast come over, and I've taken them to some pizza places. And they're like, this is actually really good. I'm like, I told you.
Yeah.
I told you.
Yeah.
It's not as common.
And also,
though. It's not
really allowing yourself to let other types of pizza into your life is like I said, it's a happier way to be. So, like my mom is still like, oh, deep dish pizza? You mean like I don't remember what she said, some derisive thing about it. It's always funny. Like, the casserole thing. I'm like, you're crazy. This is delicious. Like, I will eat deep dish pizza that's good all day, 100%. Or Detroit style pizza. Yes, whatever.
Definitely. Yeah, I definitely have opened up. I still am that person that's like, the deep dish pizza. Now, I haven't been to Chicago and had it proper yet, but I've had that style. To me, I'm still like, this is like, it's not really what I think of when I think of pizza. It's kind of its own thing. But I love it. It's really good.
Yeah, but it's fantastic.
It's delicious. How could you say it's not good?
Yeah.
Of course it's delicious. Like,
it's fantastic.
Kind of like a calzone's not a pizza.
The Chicago people I know are like, we don't actually really like deep dish here.
I've been told that a few times. Yes.
That's a tourist thing. The couple times I've been in Chicago, only once I think did we do some legendary deep dish, and the rest of the time the pizzas we got were just regular.
Thin crust,
and they were quite good.
Yeah. Yep. Now I'm hungry.
Pizza. Yeah, same.
Yeah, I have some leftovers in the fridge. I'm gonna go get some here in a little bit.
I may go find myself some pizza.
Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on. This was awesome.
Yeah, my pleasure. Happy to be here, and thanks for having me.
Of course. All right. Well, I think we can wrap this section up. We can do a little chit chat on Patreon if you're cool with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if I'm being interesting or not, so tell me if I need to be more interesting.
I'd have hung up. I would have hung up by now if it wasn't interesting. So don't worry about that. All right. For Scott, this is Blake, and as always, folks, good luck and good tones. Okay, there you have it. There it is. It's in the can. It's done. But is it? No, because there is more over on Patreon. So if you need more content and you want to get just real weird, slide over to Patreon, and for $5 a month, you can get extra episodes beamed directly to your ears every single week. There is so much bonus content over there. You can also get those extra episodes if you subscribe on Apple Podcasts. They have a subscription feature now, and it is the same price, and it is the same content. So if that is your preference, that is available to you as well. Thank you so much for hanging out. I appreciate it. Don't forget about February 9th. There's something big coming. I'm so excited to share that with you. Oh, I wish I could spill the beans, but I can't. Grant and Karen would be so disappointed. Grant and Karen being from Big Ear Pedals. Oh, maybe that's a hint. Maybe that is sort of a hint. But that's all I'm going to say because this is going to be ridiculous. Okay, you know what? Let's wrap this up. I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye. One last thing before we totally sign off here. I just want to remind you that if you do any shopping at Stringjoy, that's Stringjoy guitar strings made in Nashville, that will help me out as well. As I've said for years, I'm heavily involved in that company, and I really do think they're making the best products on the market. So if you would like to try custom strings, go to tonemob.com/stringjoy and check them out today. I seriously love what the team down there is doing. I help them out with all kinds of things, and by you supporting them, you are also supporting me as well. And hey, you need some strings, so why not get some custom strings just for your guitar and playing style? Again, the link for that is tonemob.com/stringjoy, and that will take you right to their website, and you can do all your shopping through there, and that will help everyone involved out. So thank you very much. Talk to you next time. We are brought to you by the wonderful folks at Gun Street Wiring Shop. Yes, Gun Street Wiring Shop. I've talked about them before. I used to say based out of Bend, Oregon, but guess what? Sean moved to my neck of the woods. Sean's in Portland. Sean is awesome and has helped me with a bunch of stuff lately. And if you have wiring needs for your guitar, he can help you too. If you want to get weird with it, he can get weird. If you just need to spruce things up a little bit, there's your guy. He takes all the guesswork out of doing your guitar wiring, and he makes it simple, and his customer service is top-notch, and I can't say enough good things about Gun Street as a company. I really respect Sean and what he's all about, and the product is top-notch. I've got 3 different guitars that now have Gun Street harnesses in them, and I could not be happier. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com and check them out.